Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Notes and Quotes podcast. I'm so happy to have you guys here. If this is your first time here, welcome. It really is a joy to have you here. I don't know why, I just love talking to you guys. I just always love talking to you, even if we're going to be talking about some negative things. It's not necessarily negative. I mean, it is negative. It's not the most fun thing, but it's reality, I guess, and it's important for us to know because we all are living our lives. Anyway, before I start rambling, I'm just going to get into it. So, hi guys, let's get into the topic. Actually, before we get into the topic, let me just get this out the way now. If you want to, you can check out our socials. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube if you want to keep up to date with us. And if you want to give your own feedback on this podcast episode or on any of the episodes that you listen to, you can do so using our listener survey. It's down in the description and it takes literally no time at all to do it. And it helps me out in knowing what to bring you guys for the podcast or what to change. Okay, so let's actually get into the topic now. By the way, apologies for my glasses. I've been looking at the screen all day and my head's hurting, so they're blue light glasses to help with my screen headache. So you can probably see in the lenses like a bunch of stuff that I'm looking at, but ignore it. So, our quote of the day, a very realistic quote. It's from a guy named Flip Wilson. I'm not sure who he is, but he said something very accurate. He said that the cost of living is going up and the chance of living is going down. For millennials and Gen Z, this is a very real thing that we're all facing. There is a global cost of living crisis. A lot of the data and stuff that I'm going to give you guys today is mainly from the UK, but it is a global phenomenon that's happening at the moment. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about some people's experiences. We're going to talk about the realities of the situation. And of course, I'm going to give you guys some advice on how to manage yourself in the cost of living crisis and how to not be broke, I guess, is really the crux of everything and what some research has told me in terms of things that we can do as the young adult generation entering this crazy world. Okay, so let me just talk about what inspired this episode. My mom gave me this magazine from it's Grazia magazine. I ripped out the article that I read from it. So that's what you hear if you hear the pages turning, that's what it is. If you're on YouTube, you can see this is the article. So basically, I don't really read magazines, but I did read this one for some reason because I think I was just bored. I had nothing to do. And then I came across this article in it, which is entitled Generation Stagnation, All Work and No Pay Rise. I think when I ripped it out, I'm not able to see who wrote it. So I would really love to reference them, but I can't see who wrote it. So credit to them, whoever wrote this, but it's in the Grazia magazine, 2025, March edition. Anyway, so this article was very interesting because it was talking about basically the cost of living crisis going on, how difficult it is for millennials and young people to just get into financial security and independence in their lives. It's almost impossible. And it talks about so many different women who are in very different places in their lives. Some, are working for minimum wage. Some are, established doctors and lawyers. Some have kids, some don't. Some are in a flat share. Some are living on their own. Some are married. And they're all struggling. And I highlighted a bunch of things in the article that I want to read to you guys because I think it's very applicable to people of our generation and something that you should be interested in. And then we're going to get into some more information that can definitely help you. So stick around. Okay. So the article basically starts off by saying that salaries have barely increased in the past decade. And for millennials, that's obviously terrifying because that's around the time when you're just starting to find independence and start your own lives. And not just millennials, but Gen Z as well. Hello, I'm Gen Z. And that is a terrifying thing to think about, that salaries have barely increased, but inflation is going crazy. So one of the quotes, it says, the economic landscape women find themselves in now stands in stark contrast to 50 years ago. Wage increases have not kept pace with soaring inflation. And I mean, there's a million different reasons for this. There's COVID, there's international wars and instability going on all over the place. So it makes sense why, but it's obviously a very terrifying thing for us to face. And if you want some data, it also says between January 2022 and January 2024, the price of food and non alcoholic drinks rose by around 25%. Labor analysis published in 2024 found that the cost of childcare and early years education has rapidly outstripped inflation since 2010. House prices are currently 8.8 times the average earnings. That's crazy. That's insane. And you know what? There's so many people I know that still live with their parents or are living in house shares or flat shares or living with friends or just overall still living with family, including myself. I still live in my parents' house. So, I mean, everyone is kind of in that same boat. And there was another quote where it focused on this lady. She's 31 and she still lives in her family home in London. And according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the IFS, the proportion of 25 to 34-year-olds still living with their parents has increased by more than a third in nearly 2 decades. So people are leaving home a lot less than they used to. I remember when I was younger and there was that whole phenomenon of like moving out at 18. I don't know if I would really call it a phenomenon, but it was really more of a norm that you saw in the media where people would move out at 18. And I always thought, okay, so, I'll move out at 18 and live on my own in my own apartment in some fun city like New York or London and, work towards independence in my life. Hell no. Hell no. It's not even just me that's not a norm for. That's not a norm for like anybody. Moving out at 18, that is like, oh my gosh, what did you do and what can I be doing exactly like you to get that done? Because how are you moving out at 18? Even if you move out, I think at 21, I'm looking at people like, how did you do that? I'm 22 and I still very much live with my parents and I I'm not ashamed of it because literally how are you supposed to move out at a time like this? Unless you, by some miracle, gotten some high paying job with limited experience and barely any years on you, I don't know how you would have done that, but that's impressive. Or maybe you're some influencer or something like that. It's just not the norm to not be living with your parents in your early adulthood because of the way that our society and the economic crisis is currently. So, unfortunately, this stat is not really that surprising. It actually is very reassuring. And I hope that somebody else feels the same way that I do. Okay, so there were other things that it said as well. There was this one lady that they focused on. She is a doctor. She's 32 and she makes around £75,000 a year. And she lives at home with her husband in London. And she still finds just making it to the next month very difficult. She says, yes, my salary has gone up, but if you look at inflation and the cost of living, I think it's pretty much the same. So basically, she doesn't feel like she's actually gotten more money in any sense because, yeah, she might have had like a wage increase over the years that she's been a doctor, but she hasn't actually had an increase in her financial status because inflation has been crazy and our wage increases are not going along the lines of inflation. And also, we're going to get to the point that there's actually a trend going on of wage stagnation too, where wages just aren't increasing. So even if wages increase, they're not increasing to the level that inflation is increasing to. So you're still at a deficit. And that's like, you're still lucky if your wages increase because there's so many people that wages are not increasing for. And that's the reality that we're living in. But don't worry, we're going to get to solutions as well. Stick around for that. But there was also a really interesting line in here that I was actually almost going to be the quote for this episode, but I chose against it because I found the better one by Flip Wilson that we said earlier. But this one also, I have to give it its credit for. It says in the same article, we should be working to live, not living to work. And oh my gosh, ain't that the truth? I have always been of the mindset, and I know I've said it multiple times in this podcast as well, that I don't really want to be working to live. I want to have a job that I am passionate about, something that I enjoy. I always fantasize about that idea that if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. I've always wanted that, and that's part of what this podcast is. I love doing this, and that's why I do it. But I just feel like with the way that things are, that's become such a luxury now, being able to work in something that you love. And so many people are having to take jobs that they hate. And just grinding out. That might also be part of the reason why we have the grind and hustle culture, because there's so many people that don't like what they do, but we've created this grind and hustle culture mentality to encourage people to keep going for what they want in the future, like a big house, a big car, um, financial security and independence, that those are the things that people want. And I think that's part of the reason why we have this grind and hustle culture, to encourage people to do that, even though it is a bit toxic as well, which I talked about in a previous episode, so go check that out. But that leads me into this information that I found from The Guardian, who basically talked about how the whole hating your job thing is not a new thing. It's not a new phenomenon. Older generations been hating their job way before we were even born. They have felt unfulfilled in their careers and unfulfilled in the whole 9 to 5 mentality or structure for a long time, because there's so many flaws in that structure that we won't get into right now, because that's a whole other episode. But they've been feeling like this for a long time. But the difference between that generation and this generation, which the Guardian was pointing out, which I thought was so interesting, I didn't even think about this before. They said that previous generation, before Gen Z, before millennials, Gen X, were working as a means to an end. So they were working to achieve financial security. They were working to provide for their families, to have a vacation, to get a better house, or to just get on the housing ladder in general, and just working to grow, right? Because it was a lot more accessible back then. If you worked hard, you got results. That was the model. That was what the system was. But the difference now is that young people, they're working and they have the mentality of working for as a means to an end, but they're not achieving that end because of the financial barriers that are put in place now. There's so many financial barriers. And I hate, by the way, can we just sidebar? I hate the mentality that Gen Z and millennials, but primarily Gen Z, this I think this stereotype goes for Gen Z is lazy and they're not financially smart, and they spend all their money on avocado toast and coffees and matcha lattes and stuff. Like, first of all, first of all, first of all, yes, we do love those things, but I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is less about us being lazy and more about, one, us realizing the work life balance and actually prioritizing that and prioritizing our mental health and self care, whilst also being able to be productive, and being able to be productive whilst doing those things. But simultaneously, the problem we're facing is that, okay, we can still be productive and we can still have the mentality of working hard, but we have too many financial barriers in place to even get to a level of independence that was so much more accessible back in the day. We have an ongoing global financial crisis, and the cost of living has gone crazy high, crazy, crazy high. And the wage stagnation and wage rates have gone to the levels, some articles say, to around the lines of, the 2008 financial crisis, which is just shocking. And so many young people are in debt, student loans and other forms of debt just to get by, because get an education, get a good job, that's not the reality anymore, but we still end up being in debt because that's the mentality that we're taught. Landlords are crazy. Landlords are raising rents left, right, and center. I cannot. I feel like I cannot even put into words how many times I've heard people complain about landlords, and it makes me so scared to get out there. Then, of course, birth rates are going down. And let me tell you, it makes perfect sense why birth rates go down. We are at a point in society where young people have to choose between economic security and independence. It's not, it's, you can't have both anymore. Economic security or independence. Either you live with your parents for much longer than you intended and you don't pay rent, pay for very little in terms of expenses, and you work a full-time job and you go out, sporadically, like you're a bit more tighter on your spending so that you can work to actually be able to save, because that's really one of the only ways to save nowadays. Or you're independent and you're living on your own by some miracle, or you're living in a flat share or something and you're paycheck to paycheck and struggling to just get to the end of the month. That's the reality of so many people's lives right now, especially those in the millennial and Gen Z category. That's the norm. That's not like some outlier or some, someone else. It's the norm and the average for everyone. And then it makes perfect sense why birth rates are going down. We're able to get to independence a lot slower than before. So the average 26-year-old, maybe like a decade ago, might have actually been able to have the financial security to have a family and, own a home or whatever and start their lives like that. The average 26-year-old now, some of them are still living with their parents, others are living in flat shares, others are still working in like dead end jobs that are not giving them any sort of career growth. It's ridiculous. And even if they are getting career growth and they are, getting wage increases, inflation is going crazy, so it's so difficult to actually get on the housing ladder. It's so difficult to actually even think about starting a family. In fact, it's rather dangerous because you're not going to be able to support them. So then of course, birth rates go down. Yes, that's not the only reason why birth rates are going down. There's many other factors that lead to the reason of why birth rates are going down, of course, but that is definitely one of the major factors. Let's get into some advice that I have gathered together for you wonderful people and also for myself because I, like you, I'm struggling. But it is what it is. I think for me at least, I'm very grateful to be in the situation that I am because I know it could be way worse. And I'm grateful to be living in a stable household where I don't have any like stresses or anything. And I have parents who give me a lot of freedom and independence and, let me live my life. And I don't think that that's something that should be taken for granted. And I'm grateful to have a job and all this stuff. So this is not me whinging and complaining about my life. This is just me talking about the reality of the way things are compared to how they were before. And also now me talking about the way that we can navigate our life in this cost of living crisis. So let's get into it. So, first off, this one was surprising to me. I didn't expect to get this information. So, fortune.com, I feel like most people have heard of Fortune. If you haven't, you probably have. Just Google it and you might recognize like Fortune with the CEO, Fortune 100, is it? Or is it Fortune 500 or something like that? I don't know, not the point. But basically, I was doing my research and I came across this information from them. So Gen Z is known to be the no nonsense generation, the ones that will leave and quit a job if they don't like it, the ones that are not going to take any bullshit at lying down. They're going to speak up, they're going to move on. And we've also been known to job hop. I, like you guys, if you're Gen Z, was all for the job hopping mentality. I thought that it would make more sense to, spend a few years or, a few months in a job, get the experience, get the income, and then hop to another job because that's how you got career growth. I thought that was the way to go about it. I was wrong. I was wrong. So it used to be, but now I've been told by fortune.com and by actually a lot of other sources online as well that loyalty pays and loyalty pays more than job hopping. And saying it out loud almost makes it sound obvious, but I think it's not because so many of us have the mentality of job hopping because I remember when I was younger. I don't know about you, but I remember when I was younger, the idea of staying in one job for like 25 years plus scared the living hell out of me. I hated the idea of working in one profession for the rest of my life. And to be honest, I still do. I like to have diversity. I like to, dip my toes in different things and to explore all that this world has to offer that I might be interested in. But I didn't realize that maybe you'll actually get paid more if you stick around. So let me explain. The Atlanta Fed report recently said that workers who stay in their jobs see more wage increases compared to those who switch jobs frequently. And this was a report from literally just last year, so it's quite recent. A lot of CEOs and a lot of businesses in general are valuing loyalty a lot more. It's kind of akin to back in the day when, Gen X would stay in jobs for 18, 25, 40 years and just kind of work their way up the ladder and just grow with the company. I think people of that generation always used to say, stick with the same organization. If it's a good company you're working for, stick with them and you'll get pay increases, you'll get a promotion, you'll build your career with them, and that will be good for, security for you. And as a Gen Zer, I thought that was always terrible advice. I always thought, No, you should dip your toes in other waters and see what elsewhere has to offer you. And that used to be true. It's not to say that that isn't true. That used to be true, but what I'm seeing here now is that maybe we need to go back to that kind of mentality, sticking with the organization that you're with. If it's a good one, if you're working in a job that you hate and it's a dead end job and it's not giving you any personal value, if you don't like being there, then I wouldn't say stick around. That's not something that you should force yourself to do, and I would never advocate for that. However, if you do like your job, the pay is all right, the people are great to work with, and you see yourself, providing some value to this place, then why not stay? Don't be swayed by the idea of the grass is greener somewhere else. If you like where you are, there's no shame in sticking there. And also, one of the main reasons that Fortune.com was saying this is because with the state of the economy in the way that it is right now, I feel like, by the way, can I just say that every single time that I say the word like the economy, I feel like such an adult, but that's neither here nor there, the state of the economy or whatever. Anyway, but the way that the economy is right now, there's so much competition for limited opportunities that it makes no sense to go job hopping and leaving your job for the potential of something better that might not actually even be better. They actually said that those who job hop and those who switch are actually earning a bit less than those who stick around and actually play the long haul and be patient and put in the time and put in the effort and the work, because you have to do well at the job that you currently have to actually get something better. And that something better might even be with the same job, or it might be with a different job. You don't know. But either way, put your best foot forward where you are instead of just hoping for something better and gambling with different opportunities every time. So that's something that I have as a tip that Fortune.com gave to me that was unexpected. Loyalty pays, guys. Loyalty pays. Side hustles. A good side hustle. I have been hearing about side hustles forever. I have been a side hustler for a long time. Let's go through all the side hustles I've done. My first side hustle was when I was about 13 and I wanted to buy my own phone because my parents would refuse get me a phone. So I worked for the summer at my dog groomer's. Well, I say my dog groomer. He's a dog groomer and he used to groom our dogs, and he has a dog grooming place and he wanted an assistant and I was his assistant, and I got paid like $50 a day, and I saved it all up to buy myself a phone. That was my first side hustle. My second side hustle was my first official job. I was a waitress and I was working part-time at a cafe, and then I went to a different cafe and did the same thing, but I was also bartending. And then I also side hustled with modeling, and then I side hustled with babysitting for a brief stint, a very brief stint. And then when I first got here in the UK, I side hustled with dog sitting. And now I don't know if I would say I'm side hustling now. I would say I have two part-time jobs. I don't know if I'm really side hustling as much anymore. I should get back into it because side hustles is said to be quite a good way to get some extra cash in easy ways. And if you go online, there's a lot of really creative ways in which you can side hustle, whether it's getting money by doing online surveys, or if it's dog sitting. I would highly recommend dog sitting if you're in a country like the UK, or if you're in maybe the US or a bigger country that has like a really high dog population. I think that that's something that is very lucrative. Babysitting too. Babysitting and dog sitting, can we just talk about that a little bit? Like, the money that people get from babysitting and dog sitting is way more than I thought that you would actually get. And it's so easy to break into those things. So I think you should definitely try those things. If you want to stay at home and online side hustle, I'm sure there's other ways to do it. Digital product selling. Are there old clothes that you have that are still in good condition that you want to sell? I've been trying to sell some books that I've read that I'm no longer going to read, that are just collecting on my shelf. There's always different things that you can try and sell. Sometimes it's not even just things, it's also services. So are you a good writer? Are you a good, content creator? Are you good at doing different things that you can provide as a service to somebody else? Great side hustle there. That's some money right there that you can try and leverage. So look into those. There's always good ways to get some extra income. Speaking of extra income, passive income, guys. I will always praise the term passive income. Oh my gosh, I love passive income so much. Basically, if you don't know what passive income is money that comes to you without you really having to do much. Like, it's just coming. I'm not actively working for the money, it's just coming to me. So, for examples of passive income, rent. If you are a landlord, that's passive income because you're not doing everything like on a 9 to 5 everyday job, but the money is coming into you. Rent is a form of passive income. Investments is my favorite form of passive income because compound interest is the most beautiful thing ever. Investing is one of the things that I would definitely recommend people to do. And it's really hard in this, economy because people are living paycheck to paycheck. And it's hard to find extra money to even save, let alone invest. So, what I would say is invest where you can. Even if you can invest $10 or £10 a month, that adds up. And not only does it add up, it compounds if you invest it into something that has compounding interest. I remember that I got this quote from The Office because it was Joe who came on to the show, and Dwight, I think, had just gotten a promotion or something. And she told him, Dwight, are you making that money into more money? And I was like, ooh, love it. And that's when I actually started looking into investing. I hate that. I love that that's the way that I looked into investing. But anyway, um, that's what it is though. Investing is making money into more money. You invest your £10 or however much that you can do a month. Sometimes it depends on what you earn. Sometimes it's £100, sometimes it's £1,000 that you can invest a month, and that's great for you. And it builds, and it's something that you can use for the future to get on the housing ladder, to get whatever your future goals are. That's probably one of the easiest ways, I think, to get to financial security in the long term. Those are good ways in the long term. Side hustles for more immediate gains. Long term gains, I would say passive income through investments and through other ways that you can figure it out. Look into passive income and see what are some of the easiest ways to get passive income. Budgeting is also one of the ways that is both for immediate gain and also for long term gain. Now, guys, I am not a financial expert. Please do not think that I am a financial expert. I am actually far from. I'm actually looking for a guest to come on who is a financial expert to talk to you guys and talk to me and tell me how to live my life to get financial security. This information is just from research that I've gotten and collated, and I'm giving it to you, but take my advice with a grain of salt because I'm not an expert. I'm just here as your friend talking to you because I love you. Anyway, budgeting is a really good way. And I've benefited from budgeting as well because sometimes you don't know where all your money is going, and budgeting really helps you figure that out. And sometimes you don't know how much money you actually have if you are just looking at one big chunk of it and you're just at the end of the month like, "Oh my gosh, why am I so broke?" You might be surprised if you just take the time to sit down and make a budgeting plan. I am not going to be the one to sit here, by the way, and tell you what your budgeting plan should look like because that's very personal to you and personal to your income levels, your personal expenses, and your lifestyle. So I'm not going to be the one to be able to actually give you that information. But there's a lot of different budgeting techniques that I would really recommend people to look into it and see what works for you. The easiest way to do it and to start is to just write down how much you earn and literally write down every single thing you spend money on per month, whether it's on gas, if it's on a coffee here and there, if it's on a night out, if it's on groceries, if it's on rent, if you pay rent, you know, all of those things, write them down, and then you'll see where all your money is going, and then you'll see what money you have left back. And then from there, I think that's the baseline of budgeting, and then you can figure out different budgeting techniques from there, but that's the first step, I think. Now, these next two ones I definitely live by. The first one, living within or below your means. I have always been taught that since I was a kid. And some people call me cheap, some people call me tight. I don't actually care because you know what? I'd rather be tight and cheap than broke. So, living below your means is something that is definitely, I definitely recommend. So, for example, if you have £1,000 or dollars in expendable income, just money that you can spend, don't live like you have £1,000 to spend. Live like you have £500 to spend or 700, whatever, how much you want that's less than 1,000, because then you get more in the long run. You know, I don't think that it makes sense to live like how much you earn because you'll just constantly be spending what you earn and you want to get to a level of independence. If you are constantly spending what you earn, you are never going to be independent. You'll always be living paycheck to paycheck. So if you have the power, and this is heavy on privilege, heavy on power, if you have the power to live below your means, absolutely do so. If you are cash strapped, and just because of your situation, you cannot live below your means or within your means, and you have to spend the money that you earn, that's a completely different situation. I would send you back to budgeting. I would send you back to investing. I would send you back to side hustles if those are things that you can do. Heavy on the if those are things that you can do, because I know everyone's situation is different. But speaking to the people who actually have the privilege to live below your means, definitely do so just for your own future. Your future self will thank you. I always, whenever I'm spending things, I think, will my future self thank me for this? Is this something that I really need? Is this going to provide me with any value, or just, is it going to provide me with long term value, or is it going to just provide me with immediate value? Is this a want or a need? And if it's a want, that's fine. But how deep of a want is it? Like, how valuable is this actually? Is it worth spending money on? And that's how I live my life. And people call me cheap all the time, but I don't care. Voting decisively. Now, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of the politics at all. All I'm going to say is your leaders have the power to shape the way that the economy runs, obviously. And you, by voting for them, if you live in a democratic society, have the power inadvertently to shape how the economy runs. Who you vote for really matters. I think it's such a dangerous thing to just passively vote for whoever's popular or for whoever you think you vibe with well. Like, it's not about that. You should also, by the way, not get your political information from social media and from whoever's trending online. I think it's very important to actually pay attention to the things that politicians are advocating for and see how they impact your life and see whether it's something that you want. Is this something that you want for your future? Is this a leader who you think actually represents you? All of these things are things that you should think about and help you in voting deliberately and decisively and in a way that actually benefits you and benefits the rest of us as well, so we can bring the cost of living crisis down. Thank you. That is it. Abrupt ending, isn't it? Guys, thank you so much for listening. That is all I have today. That is all I have today. My throat's dry. I'm tired of talking. I have to pee. I've been interrupted about like 5 times in this podcast episode. You obviously won't hear it because I'm editing this all the little interruptions out. But I've been interrupted so many. Somebody called me. My mom walked in the room. My brother walked in the room. People were messaging me and pinging on my computer. Because I forgot to turn the notification sounds off. I have been interrupted so many times. So I'm tired and I really need to pee. So I'm going to go. But I love you so much. Thank you so much for listening. Once again, if you want to, please fill out the listener survey so that I know how best to serve you in this podcast and what you like and don't like and what you have as suggestions. If you want, you can join our Patreon. Guys, oh my gosh, wait, I completely forgot. We have a Patreon now. So if you want to talk to each other and also myself, you can join the Patreon community chat and you guys can chat to each other about literally whatever. And it's going to be great. It's going to be great. I'm so excited to start that community on there. And check out our socials. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube, video exclusively on YouTube. And that's all I have for you guys today. I am going to go and I'll see you again next Tuesday. Stay safe, stay smart, and try not to let the cost of living get you down. You can get through this. We both can. We're struggling together, but we can get through it. Okay, anyway, that's it. I'm going to stop talking. Bye.